This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and Upsnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
All right. Good morning and welcome everybody to the Healthy Self Podcast. This is your host of the day, Regan Archibald, and really excited to be here. I'm here joined live in person with Regan Archibald. So we're going to be putting on an amazing show today. For those of you part of our HACK, our Health Accelerator community, we have a new challenge this week. So if you haven't registered for that, go to acueastwest.com/hack. That's HAC. Get registered for that. Participate every Wednesday at 4:30 Mountain Time. We are diving into different Health Accelerator topics. Right now it's on longevity, and the challenge this week is getting leafy greens consistently every day. Get some good veggies. That's something that will help extend your life. So that is the challenge of the week. So, and also our show today brought to you by thesmartmedicine.com. For all your supplement needs, go to thesmartmedicine.com. This is where you can get one of my favorites is Stem Boost. This is a protein-based powder. Includes some specific mushrooms as well as very good immune and anti-inflammatory formula. So that is one of them. My other favorite is the Intergenius. So this is nootropic. I haven't taken it this morning, so I'm a little slow, but
that's what happened.
Yeah, that's the problem. So look at Intergenius. That is at thesmartmedicine.com. All right. So today's show, we got a really interesting one. This has been, it's been a few years since we've covered this topic.
It's been almost 5 years. We'll
probably dive into some, maybe a little controversy today. Don't want to make it too crazy, but we're going to be talking about the top 10 drug prescriptions in the U.S. And I'm really intrigued. This is something that I think if you look at what's happening in the world of healthcare right now, we have pharmaceutical companies that are really growing in power and in revenue. And so we're going to dive in on this, and hopefully we don't get anyone too frustrated, but we're diving in. So let's jump in.
Okay. So some of the top medications, if you so we did the top 10 about 5 years ago, and it was a super popular podcast. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, because some of you, you may be looking for an alternative. And what we find is you guys come to this show, Your Healthy Self, so that you can actually have some alternatives when it comes to your health. And so let's go through some of the most popular drugs, and we'll also talk about the most profitable medications that exist. And maybe you guys will find this interesting, because what I find is too often we are just taking things at face value when we are prescribed a medication. And it's not a lot of you, but there's still some of you out there that you might want to reconsider because there are side effects to different medications. And our overall philosophy has always been, let's get to the root cause. Let's figure out what is going on in the body, and then work at correcting that root cause through natural therapies. And so we'll talk about some of the major drugs that are prescribed, and then we'll also give you some solutions that go along with those. So the number one most profitable medication for 2020, and this is kind of interesting. This you can find this on the True Cost of Healthcare. This is by David Belk. He's a phenomenal MD. He's got this great blog, that talks about, kind of like what is going on in health. It's a nonprofit blog, and he has some of the top 50 sellers, so really, if you looked at it, the 50 medications that were profiled, he found that they earned there's over $220 billion in worldwide sales, and 136 billion of those sales happen in the U.S. alone. So we are spending a fortune on pharmaceutical products in our country, and literally they are in every single municipal water supply. You're going to find remnants of these pharmaceutical drugs. But if you just look at the math, Cade, maybe you can do a percentage. What's the 220 billion total worldwide sales from the pharmaceutical companies, 16 major pharmaceutical companies, and then 136 billion of that was from the U.S. That seems like it's going to be around 65% is my guess, but 59%. Yeah, so that's a lot that's going on here. And the fact that we're taking that many medications, maybe there's some things we can do to maybe find some solutions here. So the number one most expensive but profitable medication, Humira. The lowest retail price for Humira for the 80 milligram prescription is $5,243. Humira treats rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatic diseases, and IBS. It's, if you have an autoimmune disease, there's a good chance to get put on Humira. The second most profitable is Eliquis, and that's an anticoagulant, so it's a blood thinner and used for heart arrhythmias. We have a lot of patients on Eliquis, but with Humira, the total sales was just under 20 billion. U.S. sales were about 13.7 billion, and these are 2020 numbers. In 2021, you'll see there's some massive things. So we have a blood thinner, we have autoimmune drug, and by the way, there's certain times where I've seen Humira just like change people's lives, and there's certain patients who absolutely need to be on a blood thinner. So these things are really, it's interesting, but maybe if we look and we say, well, is there some opportunities outside of this?
And total sales for Eliquis is just under 10 billion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like half of what Humira is. Humira is like almost 20 billion, and then you're at 10 billion.
Yeah, and so that's crazy because one of the most popular prescription drugs of all time is Synthroid. And it always is in the top 5. There's always going to be your Lipitor, Crestor, some of the statins are going to be in the top 5. But with autoimmunity, if we look at that and we say, well, what's triggering all the autoimmunity in our country? And maybe we can approach that a little later. But yeah, these are big things. Revlimid, this is for multiple myeloma, another $10 billion medication. There's a chemotherapy drug, makes number 4 at 7 billion. Enbrel, which many of you have heard about, that's another one that's very similar to Humira, and that's Amgen and Pfizer make this, and it's a $7 billion a year medication. These are the total sales for, once again, rheumatic diseases, autoimmunity. Herceptin, this is breast cancer chemotherapy. I mean, there's another drug, Eylea, for macular degeneration. So there's chemotherapy, diabetes, and then there's HIV, pneumonia vaccine, rheumatic diseases, and then as you start going down the list, it's like, well, this is where all of that $220 billion is coming from. A lot of these core pharmaceutical companies, and so the big problem for this is that even when they report this, especially with the chemotherapy medications, the cost is going to vary, and because some of the chemotherapies need to be repeated several times, and so what we see on average is there's going to be around a $200,000 to $250,000 price tag just for chemotherapy.
Yeah, I was looking at this one. So Epclusa, how do you pronounce that? It's almost $25,000 for 30 pills.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's these are not inexpensive treatments for a lot of patients, and so I think what David Balk has done, and so many other great researchers out there, people in the healthcare field who really care, they're looking and they're saying, well, maybe we could actually start doing something a little better in healthcare, and maybe there's some things that we can do to actually decrease costs. And this is one of the big frustrations that I think all of us have right now is we have the new profits coming out from Pfizer, from Moderna, based on the vaccines, where they hadn't tallied all the numbers, but last time I heard, Pfizer was at about $35 billion in total sales from the vaccine. And so, it's like, well, the taxpayers are writing this check, and in a lot of cases, we don't have a clear placebo group, so we don't have a lot of clarity on that yet. But it seems like we may want to start tackling things a little smarter. So let's move into the top 10 drugs prescribed in the U.S. right now. So the number one is Vicodin. So Vicodin is for pain. So what could you use in place of Vicodin? If you have pain, this is hydrocodone with acetaminophen. There's some great peptides that we use for pain. BPC 157 is a great peptide for pain. ARA 290, we've seen great things, especially if you have some of those small nerve fibers that have been damaged, like with neuropathy. Those can be great things for pain. Acupuncture. Kate, what do you think of acupuncture for pain?
I love it. Yes.
Why is that?
Acupuncture, and I think going back to peptides, all these different treatments, a lot of these that Regan's mentioning, they don't have many side effects. Acupuncture, you can get some healing, some healing responses where it may kind of exacerbate your symptoms at different instances, but yeah, you just feel really good. There's some endorphins that kick in. It's nice and relaxing. It's like soothing.
Mm-hmm.
The side effects on that are not bad at all. You feel alive and great. I think you read some of the side effects on Vicodin, you got lightheadedness, dizziness, nausea, vomiting. I don't think I've ever experienced breathing. That with acupuncture or with any of the peptides that you mentioned there.
No.
Impairs thinking, reducing physical abilities, and is habit forming.
Yeah, acupuncture can be habit forming, but just because it feels good, but it's not going to be addictive. And so I think there's something to be said. When I started looking at what I wanted to devote my life to when it came to healthcare, I realized that there was just such a void out there in the healthcare industry where we're using a pharmaceutical prescription to work on one pathway, like Vicodin, for example, is primarily working on the opiate pathway in the brain. And so it's stimulating the opiate growth factors. And then what happens is you take Vicodin and you have the opiate growth factors get saturated, and then your brain creates more growth factors, more opiate outgrowth. So it's like, okay, now you're going to need more and more and more. So you're always chasing that high. And not everybody gets addicted to it, but so many people do. We know we're in an opiate crisis. And, sad thing is this, according to medicine.net, medicinenet.com, this is, one of the most top prescriptions being filled right now in the United States. And we know the side effects of these medications. So with Vicodin, how do you get rid of pain? Well, first of all, if you're in Salt Lake, we're going to have a seminar on pain today at 12:30. So cruise on over. We'll give you some great solutions. But there's treatments that have worked for thousands of years. Let's get your your diet healthy. Let's actually start moving your body in a natural way. Let's get some rehab going. Let's get some energy flow with acupuncture. Let's use some regenerative medicine, some peptide therapy, some ozone, some PRP. These are great things. Susan said, when I started with you, I was on 10 prescriptions. Whoa. And after herbs and acupuncture, I'm on 2. Thanks, Susan. Well, there
Thanks
you go.
for sharing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, and Susan, you may not know that there's a condition called polypharmacy syndrome. And that syndrome means if you're on 5 or more medications, you have a 100% chance of having an adverse reactions to those medications. So when somebody comes into the office and they're on 10 medications, we say, well, we don't know if it's your body that's causing these symptoms or if it's the medication. And so, in a lot of times, we ask you to work with your primary care doctor or the prescribing physician and see what we can do to start getting you off those medications. I've never met a patient who did not want to actually get rid of medication. There's not anyone out there that's just like, oh, I love swallowing this pill every day and I enjoy the side effects of brain fog and lightheadedness. Like, I just feel better when I don't feel my best. So
yeah.
So
I haven't had too many conversations like that.
I haven't heard that. Like, if I can just feel crappy, I would feel like I've met my purpose of life. So we don't hear that often, but we do know medications can be life-saving. And man, by all means, if you've had a surgery, Vicodin for those first couple of days can be huge.
It's a lifesaver there.
We're not going to call you a pansy. Trust me, if you tap out and need some, but yeah, so that's one of them. So if we look at pain, man, there's so many things.
The other one would be Mitra.
Yeah, Mitra can be a really good, and many of you have had that. Either the red Mitra seems to work better for pain. The green's a bit more of a nootropic. That's my favorite. The white can also be more of a nootropic, but yeah, there's natural things that exist. Mitra does work on those opiate pathways. It's got the alkaloids in there, so it can be, it can be overprescribed, overused in certain cases, but it can also be, man, we've helped a lot of patients use that as a bridge to get off of it. There's another peptide called metenkephalon, and metenkephalon helps with creating new opiate growth factors, but in a way where your body does not get dependent on it. And then we found that another good successful treatment for chronic pain is low-dose naltrexone, especially for our patients who are on, like maybe Humira or Enbrel, or they have some type of autoimmunity that usually comes with a lot of pain. Just taking that low-dose naltrexone can be incredibly powerful for you. So there's so many options when it comes to pain. And luckily at our clinics, I mean, we have so many opportunities to get you out of pain, and that can be, using different modalities from anywhere from physical therapy down in St. George, acupuncture at all our clinics, chiropractic care. We have a great new physician assistant coming on who will be doing osteopathic manipulation, and then we have all the procedures that we can do that are just phenomenal. And then there's certain cases where now we've teamed up with some of the best pain interventionists in the world right here in Utah. And so on Saturdays, we open up a surgical center and do more natural therapies right out of the surgical center.
Yeah, and that's where we're able to get really, really direct and deep into whatever specific area. And there's some really effective treatments to help there. And also the manipulation under anesthesia is super intriguing and a really, really cool treatment where really it's nice for the patient because you can just you take a little nap and you wake up feeling nice and loose and limber.
Yep. Just do a light sedation, and then you're still awake when you're getting it, but you're kind of in a funny state, and then you come out of that and you feel like a boss. So there's some great things that we can do. So if any of you have pain right now, I'm just going to challenge you, just let us know and call the office. What's our main line, Cade?
It's 801-879-8. I'm sorry, guys. I usually have it on a sticky note right next to my. It's
All right, well, just call
801-582-2011.
There you go.
That'll take you to the Salt Lake office at least.
Let us know where you're at. But we'd love to help you get out of pain. That's one of our primary purposes. Is we want to help people end pain. We want to end pain for good because this epidemic that we're in, this opiate epidemic is crazy, and the fact that Vicodin's being prescribed at such a rampage right now because this is where people end up, not being able to get their prescription filled. They go to other substances that are out there. So the next one we're going to talk about is simvastatin, and this is generic for Zocor, and this is statin, and so this is for high cholesterol. And so some of the most common side effects are headaches, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, brain fog, muscle pain, especially in the legs. And so like other statins, it can cause muscles to break down. And so if you look at your brain, 57% of your brain is fat, and about 25% of that fat is actually cholesterol. So cholesterol can be a really good thing, but high cholesterol, if we look at the causes of high cholesterol, that's where we have to really start being a little more strategic and saying, well, what is it that's causing that high cholesterol in the first place? And usually what we find, contrary to popular belief, is it's not the fat that people are eating. Like we ate a bunch of, free-range chickens locally there in Midway this morning. And so someone with high cholesterol, if their doctor's not up to speed, they may tell you, hey, the eggs have a lot of cholesterol in them. Don't eat eggs. Problem with that advice is what we've learned is it's not the cholesterol we eat that is causing high cholesterol. Of course, there's like a 1 or 2% of you who have a genetic variant that causes you to produce more cholesterol in your liver, but really it's usually the sugar that's causing the high cholesterol. So for those of you who have high cholesterol, you probably noticed we tell you, we're like, we still want you to get great sources of fat that does have healthy cholesterol in it. We also want you to eat lots of good proteins and then lots of vegetables, but no sugar, no processed foods, especially the sodas. We've seen patients with super high LDL cholesterol, and then what happens is they get off the soda and their blood, their lipid levels just balance out. Come on down. So, but if you can't get that, and if you said, well, I've tried everything, Reagan, I do exercise, I'm eating the right foods, but my LDL and HDL ratios aren't balancing, I still have high triglycerides. Well, this is where the peptide epitalin comes in. And epitalin, there's been a lot of research on this in its ability to prevent heart disease, cardiovascular events. And so Lipitor is one of those that you could absolutely maybe talk to your cardiologist about, or your primary care, your prescribing physician, and say, hey, maybe I'd like to try something new, and give it a try for 90 days, and it might be worth your while because unlike the statin, you have this capability of having very low side effects. The epitalin is a peptide that regulates your circadian rhythm, so it works right on the pineal gland. It's a telomerase enzyme, so that means your telomeres get longer. You have better DNA silencing, so you have better replication of your DNA, and it does extend life by 7 years in some of the studies. So just by doing that, you cut down your cases of chronic disease by 50%. So epitalin is a phenomenal peptide for those of you who have high cholesterol.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. And cholesterol is actually, I think the thing to look at is what's the root underlying cause to that high cholesterol, because to Reagan's point, sugar can cause that, but really, it's actually a natural anti-inflammatory that our body produces more of when it's got this increase in inflammation. Is it right?
Well, cholesterol's it's cortisol that's the hormone it's our only anti-inflammatory hormone, but cholesterol is there to repair the damage when inflammation spikes in our blood vessels and then our blood vessels get damaged. So then cholesterol is like the raw material that's like if you think of our blood vessels like a brick,
patches up the damage.
yeah, like bricks that get separated. It's like, okay, let's put some more mortar in there, and that's what, like, especially the LDL particles, is if you keep putting mortar on the wall, and pretty soon you got a tunnel, and that tunnel gets real narrow, and then
you got a problem.
Then they say, well, you need a stent, and then what we're realizing in some of the studies that maybe stents don't even help that much, because they end up getting plugged up, and then there's different materials, but even stents can be pretty dangerous. And so this is where it's really important to look upstream, and once again, let's not take things at face value, because yeah, there's a lot of medications out there. The pharmaceutical company is bigger than it's ever been. I imagine that at this stage of my career, almost 20 years in, I believed that we would wake up as a society and say, man, the pharmaceutical companies bring some great research and breakthroughs in medicine, but they're not doing much for health. They're doing a lot for disease. And so I thought we'd be far more heavy on the health and prevention side than we are these days. And so that's one of the things, once again, this is one of our purposes here, is how can we help you live as long as possible and as healthy as possible, where we align your lifespan with your health span. And that's where looking outside of the box a little bit, you can find some awesome opportunities. So that's simvastatin. The third most prescribed medication right now is lisinopril. And lisinopril is for hypertension, and once again, you guys are gonna, many of you are on these medications, and we're not saying just jump off these medications. Talk to your prescribing physician first, but there might be some other solutions, and so we're giving you some lifestyle. By the way, a lot of these statins, they come from red rice yeast extract. So classic Chinese medical formula for phlegm, fire, misting the heart is the classic condition. Sounds like a rock band, huh?
Say that one more time.
Red rice yeast.
No, but what's the Chinese medical diagnosis?
When you have high cholesterol or high triglycerides, or metabolic acidosis, is phlegm, fire, misting the heart. So that's where
phlegm, fire, misting the heart.
So you get heat in the cardiovascular system.
So
remember this, and some of you may say, "Oh, that's so unscientific, Regan, and you just lost credibility with me because you're using Chinese medical terms." Well, maybe you should get over yourself if that's you, but I don't think it's any of you. But if it is, then you go back and you say, historically, they had these conditions mapped out 2,500 years ago. So they're observing the body, and they're saying, oh, well, if we use red rice yeast, then that takes the pressure off the heart, and the person doesn't have the flushed face. Their heart rate starts to calm down. They weren't using blood pressure cuffs, but they were able to really observe and see what blockages were in the body. And so what the pharmaceutical companies have done is they've taken the active molecules out of red rice yeast, and they've created a synthetic version and that works on one pathway, whereas red yeast rice and any Chinese herb or any peptide works on multiple pathways. So it's called pleiotropic. Pharmaceutical companies work on one pathway only, and that's how you do the double-blind studies, and that's where you can clearly define the mechanism of action, which the FDA loves, because once they know the mechanism of action, then you can say, okay, what are the side effects that come with it? But if you work on one pathway only, you have multiple side effects. If you work on multiple pathways, you have very little to no side effects.
Wow.
Does that make sense? So
it makes sense. I like the term. I think that sounds more scientific than high blood pressure.
What? Phlegm, fire, misting? Yeah. I think we could do a whole podcast on that. Yeah.
Maybe a little Dungeon and Dragon-ish.
It's a Harry Potter diagnosis that we're doing today, folks. We're going to listen to your pulse and look at your tongue. Okay, phlegm, fire, misting the heart. But actually, it's really fascinating to look at the way that the body responds to nature and where we have imbalances. And so if you can identify those, then there's ways of breaking free, because nobody wants to have muscle cramps. I had a patient who was on statins, and he was a diving instructor. He was actually an Olympic athlete, and he went to demonstrate a dive. He'd been on statins for about 10 years because his cholesterol was high, even though he was a super healthy guy. And the quads peeled right off of his legs, and so he couldn't walk properly because of it. So yeah, it's sad. There are side effects. I mean, it's uncommon, but that did happen. Okay, the fourth most common prescription right now is levothyroxine. Once again, it's always in the top 5. Now, levothyroxine, many of you are saying, "I know what this is, Regan," and that's great. And this is T4, and so it's Synthroid. Levothyroxine is generic for Synthroid. This has been around for 70 years now. 1950 is when it was created, and it saved so many people's lives. Very popular medication because you guys know how important the thyroid function is. So levothyroxine is 100% T4, and if you remember the coffee bean analogy, do you remember that one, Kate? It's on our website. I don't know if you guys have a chance to read it. If you're interested, it's basically T4 is like a coffee bean, and if I gave you a cup of coffee beans this morning, you probably would have looked at me funny.
Yeah, I need a grinder and I need some hot water and a press.
Good. And so that's what I did. I ground it up and I put it in hot water and a French press, and there you go. And it was all distilled. So when you grind up the beans, that's like T3. So even if you're taking Synthroid, you still have to get that T4 and get it converted in your liver. Your thyroid peroxidase enzymes also help in that conversion process. So you want to make sure there's no thyroid peroxidase antibodies, because that can get in the way and inhibit the conversion of T4 to T3. And then in your liver is where the majority of that takes place. And then once the beans get ground up in the liver's like the grinder, then the beans go into the digestive system, and that's where it gets distilled. And then you get all that nice drip coffee all day long without the caffeine, obviously, because this is a thyroid hormone. But when you're just dumping in T4 into the body, and it might not be that you need more coffee beans. It might be that you have enough coffee beans, but the problem is your grinder is not working. Like it's dull, you need the blade sharpened, or you might not be letting it distill long enough, so you're not getting that steady drip, and then your energy's dropping in the afternoon. So one of the things we look at when it comes to levothyroxine, and for those of you who are like, well, I'm on it, I'm interested in, what can I do differently for my thyroid? Well, this is where you can talk to one of our doctors about getting on some T3, maybe doing some compounded versions of T4 and T3. Or seeing at the root cause of your thyroid, do you have like autoimmune condition going on? Are your thyroid globulin antibodies elevated? Or what about your thyroid peroxidase antibodies? These are really important things to look at. And then there are some of you who say, I really want to just not take any medications at all. I don't want to be on any hormones at all. And that's fine. And so this is where we look at some of the peptides. And this is where you want to work on the pathways that are the root cause, because with thyroid, Kate, I mean, what would you say are some of the pathways that people are going to show up with? What do we see in thyroid? I mean, what can cause the thyroid to be off?
Yeah, so it can be liver related. It can actually be cholesterol related. Mm-hmm. It can be digestive system related. 90% of cases, more specifically to women, is autoimmune related as well. So that's where your tissues or your cells are attacking different thyroid tissue or different mechanisms. And so if that's what's actually causing it, you need to address that in order to fix the problem. Otherwise, if we just keep pumping in hormone, what we've learned over time with hormones is they eventually replace your body's natural ability to create those hormones. If you're dumping in something externally into your body, the internal mechanisms of your body start getting kind of lazy. Like they're like, oh, well, we got plenty of this in the bloodstream and system, and so I can kind of take a break and not worry about it.
Don't have to produce it. And this is where it's really important, because in multiple cases, you don't even need the hormone. What you need is let's look at the gut, let's look at your liver function, and let's look at your immune system. And if those three things are clearly analyzed, and then you can even start looking at the adrenal hormones. Cortisol can downregulate your thyroid production. So if you start looking at these patterns, then maybe you can use different peptides. And so this is where like thymosin alpha-1 can be really helpful. This is also where we look at a peptide like CJC 1295 ipamorelin, because it triggers the growth hormone, and when growth hormone's active, that takes some of that burden off of the cortisol levels in your body. Your body goes into more of a relaxed state, and then it can produce more thyroid hormone. So that can be a great way of getting your thyroid activated. Even KPV, if you have leaky gut, KPV is a great peptide. You can use that with BPC 157 and actually do a lot for the gut-related issues with thyroid. And what we see is patients' antibodies come down, they start feeling better, and maybe they don't need as much medication, because if you take too much thyroid hormone, then you start feeling that chest pain, that increased heart rate, excessive sweating, heat intolerance, nervousness, headaches, weight loss. I had a patient who kept going to endocrinologists, and all they would do is adjust her synthroid. I've had multiple patients, but this one particular patient, she just felt like her eyes were going to bulge out of her head. And I remember she was just exhausted because she was so anxious she couldn't sleep. And then they'd take her off, they'd lower the dose, and then she'd be too tired. And then they'd raise it up. She'd feel good for a couple of days. And it was just a roller coaster. But we ran a stool test on her, and we found out that she had SIBO, and that's small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And then just by clearing out the SIBO, she no longer had the need for medication. And so that was pretty interesting. So once again, getting to the root cause is what functional medicine's all about. And that's in the show, we try to give you guidance on what might be going on in your body without giving you medical advice, but we like to give you some insights on what can actually help you. So should we go to number 5, Kate?
Yeah.
All right. Well, good. Make sure that if you guys have questions on any of these, feel free to fire them off. We're going to go through the top 10 in this show. So number 5 is erythromycin. Many of you have heard of this, Zithromax or Z-Pak. I just need a Z-Pak, and it's a pretty cool name. It's kind of like Tupac. I think they stole that from...
It looked like Z looks almost like a 2, and then Pac or Pack.
Yeah, because it's spelled pretty much the same, maybe the C instead of a K, or it could be like a Jay-Z pack. So this one, I hope I didn't get anyone in trouble, but there could be some copyright issues going on here with some rap artists. But so erythromycin, antibiotic, ear, throat, sinus infections, very common, especially sinus infections. People typically say, I need a Z-Pak. It's just been indoctrinated in us. Some of the common side effects. When you take an antibiotic, one of the big issues you got to watch out for are loose stools, nausea, stomach pain, vomiting. Some very rare side effects can be abnormal liver tests, allergic reactions, nervousness, abnormal heartbeats. The other issue with antibiotics that is not often discussed is what happens to your natural flora in your gut. And so some literature says that it takes up to a year to replenish the good flora in your gut. And so that's a big deal if you look at this. So what can you do in case of a sinus infection? Because you don't want that thing to fester. And Kate, you've had a sinus infection. What's it feel like?
Feels like your head's going to explode.
Feels like a hammer.
Yeah.
Like a jackhammer.
Lots of pressure in there.
Mm-hmm.
It can be all around. Yeah. I used to get sinus infections quite often.
Does it make your head get bigger?
Yes, and your IQ goes up, and
it's good. All the pressure just makes my brain feel so good. Yeah, but sinus infection, you feel kind of like lethargic, out of it. Yeah, you can't smell.
Feels like you got hit in the side of the head with a 2x4.
Yeah. So for you boxers out there, you're like, that's nothing. I've been hit by Mike Tyson. Like, it's worse than a 2x4. But for the rest of us humans, these sinus infections are no good. So what can you do? Well, sinus infections, once it's gone and you got the green mucus, like this can be a lifesaver, right? But if you can catch it early on, and if you can start to sense like the foods you eat have a real impact on the amount of mucus production you have, because anytime you eat food, you have this nice little release of this proton pump. And the proton pump just stimulates all the enzymes in your body. And once you get the enzymes, have you noticed that your nose gets kind of stuffy when you eat? Has anyone noticed that? And you're like, oh man, I eat and then I've got just a little bit of, extra mucus.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be that much. It should just be a little bit, and it's nothing you should have to cough up. But that's just a natural production from those enzymes. So, but where you really want to be careful is if you notice that you get an overproduction of mucus, and dairy can do this, gluten can do this. The worst is sugar. So when you eat a lot of sugar, you're going to notice, oh, I'm so phlegmy. And it's like, well, maybe we ought to clean up your diet. And some of the most non-reactive foods tend to be meats, where our body doesn't have a severe reaction to those. And so for some people, it may be like, hey, we need to get you off everything, but just get you on some meat diet. And that can help clear up the sinuses in phenomenal ways. Now, some of you that may not be the solution. We'll have to talk, but at the end of the day, one of the big things you can do on a regular basis is get good, healthy sources of vegetables, eat some type of fermented foods every day, and then making sure that you're keeping your sinuses nice and clear. You can use a neti pot if you can catch it soon enough. Just don't use it every day. Kate has, what would you call it?
The Navage.
The Navage.
So it's like battery powered, or you got these little saltwater things that you put in with kind of lukewarm water, and you just press the button and it just pressurizes water and it goes in and out.
That's awesome.
It's a little like at first time you're doing it, you're holding this big old machine up to your nose, and it's like the pressure starts and then you can just feel it go around.
Wow.
Yeah, I made the mistake of doing it, like I did it a couple times during the day for like 2 or 3 days because I had a really bad sinus infection, and at the end of that, it just like had burned my sinuses.
Jeez.
So don't overdo it. That was not intelligent on my part. I'm kind of that guy that's like, if a little bit is good, more is better.
Yeah, I've noticed that about you. Yeah. You're like, I just jumped my mountain bike 20 feet in the air. I bet I could go 25 because that was really fun. Yeah, that's Cade. But you can use Magnolia Clear Sinus. Use that on a regular basis.
There's some really good herbs for it.
Yeah, Pueria Clear Sinus. These are phenomenal. There's a peptide called LL37 that breaks up biofilms. It's an antimicrobial peptide. You can use BPC 157 or KPV on a regular basis because your sinuses have their own flora just like your gut does. So if you're really blasting it out all the time, you might be killing some of that good bacteria.
Yeah.
And then get a stool test. That's a critical thing. And if you've had antibiotics, it's really critical that you do some re-inoculation work. And that's where, probiotics, prebiotics are really key. So let's go to the next one, which is metformin. This is also generic for glucophage. And this is to treat type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance in both adults and children. Some of the common side effects, I hear this a lot: nausea, I can't take this, I'm nauseated all the time, or vomiting, gas, bloating, diarrhea, and loss of appetite. Metformin is actually a mitochondrial toxin. It works right on that pathway, but it has been shown to extend longevity in certain trials. But if we look at it, well, what else could we do to balance our blood sugar? And that's where getting into our hacks would be really important. Because we have a bunch of cool things on time-restricted eating, on getting rid of your sugars until nighttime. Maybe you do some fruit at night, but minimizing your fructose consumption to 20 grams a day. Carbohydrates, depending on what your labs show, but most of us need to decrease our carbohydrates. I think the average is about 30%. The energy multiplier is a great formula for balancing blood sugar. It's on the smartmedicine.com. And then the peptides that we love, we've got 5-amino-1-MQ. And that's a phenomenal peptide because it works on the NNMT pathway. So it helps you use your GLUT transporters so that you can actually transport glucose from the surface of the cell into the mitochondria. MOD-SC, which I know a lot of you are big fans of MOD-SC, that can balance your blood sugar very well because it's a mitochondrial derived peptide. And then some other things that work really well is AOD9604. So it's a phenomenal thing. So berberine is the #1 herb in the Smart Medicines formula for balancing blood sugar. So maybe there's some things you can do. Okay, so we'll speed it up just a little bit here. Lipitor, once again, this is another statin. So similar to the simvastatin, same side effects, same treatment. Let's look at doing something like epitalin. Another peptide that's been shown to help balance cholesterol is actually ARA 290. So it's another great one. Amlodipine. This is the next one. This is number 8, and this is for hypertension. And a lot of you have heard of this one. Amlodipine, some of the side effects can be, headache, swelling of the lower extremities, dizziness, flushing, fatigue, nausea, palpitations. And so once again, with hypertension, we've seen epitalin, ARA 290. These are some great things, but then just looking at your body from a functional medicine perspective, hawthorn berry, get some hawthorn berry tea. It's super tasty. Schisandra can be really good for high blood pressure, and gastrodia. These are some great herbs. Even gentiana, which is berberine, that can be an awesome thing. So looking a little bit differently at these medications. And then number 9, we have amoxicillin. This is a very common antibiotic. We used to give it to our cattle all the time when they got sick, and it's still being used in humans to treat ears, tonsils, throat, larynx, urinary tract, skin infection. Its side effects. Oh, go ahead.
Are you allergic to penicillin? That's the one allergy I know I have.
I think I am. Yeah, I don't know. I believe when I was a kid, I was told that. So maybe I haven't taken an antibiotic in, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years, I guess. But yeah, this amoxicillin, once again, same treatment as when we talked about the Z-Pak. Let's get the gut figured out, but really looking at the white blood cells, because amoxicillin is a broad spectrum antibiotic, so it can cause that diarrhea, heartburn, nausea, itching, vomiting, confusion, abdominal pain, rash, allergic reactions. So, but it can also be life-saving, right? I mean, penicillin.
Antibiotic, like the founding of antibiotics early on was a game changer for a lot of things, because especially war, that was like the biggest killer in like old war times was infections.
Exactly.
People get wounded and then they die from the infection rather than the wound.
Yep.
So some of these antibiotics, it was a big game changer. But I think, when we went so overboard of like, all right, everyone needs antibiotics. If you got the sniffles, get on an antibiotic. That's going to fix it up.
Yep.
And then I think long term, that's created some allergic reactions for some of us.
Yep.
Genetically, that gets passed on. Mm-hmm. And then we realize, oh, this is like killing our gut flora, because it's like a nuke that you just are nuking the whole system, which sometimes that's necessary if you got a really nasty bug that you got to kill.
Right.
But at the same time, if it's like something that your natural immune system can handle, then taking some immune support herbs, supplements, nutrition is going to be a lot more effective than just nuking the whole body.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the most important things when you look at it. And then we say, why did we get an infection in the first place? And so if you can go upstream and look at your white blood cells. So next time you have your labs in front of you, do you have a low white blood cell count, or are your neutrophils elevated? Because if your neutrophils are elevated, you might have an infection, or many of you, especially women, can be walking around with a urinary tract infection with no symptoms. And so that's one of the reasons we have you do a urinalysis, is just you can look at the urine and see if there's an infection, an active infection. But so many people, we come in, we run their labs, and we find, wow, you have high neutrophils or high lymphocytes. High lymphocytes would indicate there's a viral infection going on. High neutrophils that indicate it's bacterial. And so then we have to say, well, do you have a tooth infection, or is there an abscess? Is it a urinary tract infection? What is it? But if you can go back and always work on your gut, get a stool test at least once a year, that gives you some insulation against these infections so that maybe you don't need these medications. But when you do use an antibiotic, if you haven't used it in a long time, go through the whole prescription. Don't stop short of it. You want to make sure you eradicate that infection. But you won't be antibiotic resistant, because so many people are antibiotic resistant. And we've seen this same thing with the vaccine. We've been deploying it in so many humans that the virus has mutated more aggressively in a way we don't want it to mutate. So it's this Delta variant, and now there's new ones coming up all the time because now we have vaccine-resistant viruses going on. So it's no different than what we've done with antibiotics, is where we've just thrown it out there. So just once again, let's be reasonable and a bit more level-headed when it comes to our health and our decisions. And maybe there's some things that we can do to help prevent this. So the last one is the hydrochlorothiazide, and this is your diuretic. So once again, if you look at the amlodipine, one of the most common side effects are swelling in the lower extremities, so then you need to get put on a water pill. And so this can cause electrolyte imbalances, stress, rashes, light sensitivity, impotence, nausea, abdominal pain. Otherwise, no big deal. So make sure you're getting your electrolytes in on this one. And this, with this issue here, this is where sarcotropin is a great peptide. It's a liquid one. It's a GHRP2, GHRP6. But that would be a great one in place of this. And it's got the L-arginine, L-citrulline, so it helps with circulation and can move that water weight out. So hopefully that was interesting. Cade, what are your thoughts on that?
Very interesting. It's wild looking at all the revenue and money that's all tied up into that pharmaceutical industry. And then you look at it'd be interesting to compare, because the supplement industry has been growing, and it's a growing world. But that's all food-based, plant-based things, as opposed to, the pharmaceuticals are primarily chemical-based. And so,
sure,
really, it'd be intriguing. Maybe on a future show we can look at the comparables on the revenue side of things. That's something that's intriguing to me, is just looking at it from the
business perspective.
There is a lot of funding that goes in through that. I was just reading an article on Moderna. They're with the profits they're making off the vaccine is wild, and they initially started with $1 billion from the federal government to do the R&D on it.
Yep.
So we need our ROI on that, guys. Anyways, I won't get too far down that rabbit hole. So we're out of time today. We really appreciate you guys joining us. Once again, our sponsor of the show is thesmartmedicine.com. For any of your supplement needs, go to thesmartmedicine.com and grab yourself. We talked about Energy Multiplier today. That's a great blood sugar stabilizer, so go grab some. And we love you so much. We will see you next week, same time, same place. And have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
See you guys.